Hi, this video is based on the blog article that I just finished regarding tagging of resources in cloud environments. Now, the blog article is available on our website, of course. It is focused quite heavily on tagging in Azure specifically, but the basic principles still apply regardless if it's AWS or Google Cloud. Although there are some differences regarding tagging for those environments. But go ahead and read this article, and in this video I'll instead be going through the resource tagging policy itself to kind of elaborate on the tags mentioned in the policy. So let's get started doing that, and please go ahead and read this article before or pause this video and read through this article to give you kind of the background. So what we have here in the policy, let's just kind of go through it very quickly here. You see a lot of tags, a lot of tables here in this policy. Basically suggestions on tags that you could choose to implement in your cloud environment. Now, we do have some mandatory tags possible to apply at different levels, subscription level and resource group level. We also have some tags that are specifically used for automation to enable that, and also some optional tags that you could use in certain cases if it's beneficial for your organization or for yourself. So let's go ahead and take a look at the tags then. So what we have first, the environment tag, and a lot of these are based on, of course, the recommendations provided by Microsoft, and at the bottom of the blog article I provide references to where you can read more on what Microsoft, Amazon and Google kind of says about tagging resources. But okay, let's go ahead. Environment, that is usually specified at the subscription level. People tend to isolate or use a subscription for a specific purpose. The other side to this is, of course, if you have an app service where you are using slots, you could have a development, a testing, QA staging, and production slot. So keep that in mind, since that would mean then that the production environment could very well have all these kind of resources. So you need to kind of think on how you would want to approach that scenario. But regardless, some in subscriptions you could definitely want to use dedicated sandbox subscription, for example. You might have one for development, regardless, really. So this doesn't using the environment tag at the subscription level doesn't take away from being able to assign tags on related to specific slots in a web app service, for example. Now, one thing here is the business units. Some subscriptions might be dedicated to running a specific workload. A workload being many applications consisting of, in turn, many services. So in those cases, you could want to isolate all the workload, all the applications used by that business unit to one subscription, and then you would use this business unit tag to provide some information on who is responsible or who is using basically that entire subscription. We also have the owner, and in the article this kind of ties into the how would you say, the accountable person or persons, but usually person, who is accountable for everything that is done with the resources at the end of the day. So this would be a manager or someone that owns, or someone is ultimately responsible for ensuring the security and the governance of said resources here. Now this will of course change over time, so keep in mind that people tend to move around in the organization, and this could be a not a personal email. It could be definitely a email attached to the position itself, making it easier to keep it updated in the long run. Another tag, the purpose tag. This tag could be really helpful just to kind of explain what the subscription is used for. If there is some other additional information that could really help people to understand why the subscription is needed, what it is being used for, what the resources are being used for. Now this could very well be applied at the subscription level, but also the resource group level. I'm not sure purpose on in here as well. So if this could very well be helpful, at least to explain to people who are not don't have the kind of the insights into the subscription, the resources, how they've been configured, what they're being used for, by whom, and so on. So this could kind of help them by explaining the kind of the business case of this subscription. Then, well, if you assign the tags at the subscription level, then that means that they apply to all the resource groups and all the resources within that subscription. Pretty much. I mean, some exceptions might be there, of course, but still these should apply to all resource groups and resources. So this means that you want to maybe keep down the number of tags assigned at the subscription level, just so that you can add more details, more specific details and information at the resource group level. But these tags, which are here in the resource group level table, could very well be assigned at the subscription level if you choose to do so. So it's entirely up to you. And so this means that the cost center tag, this could definitely be entered or assigned at the subscription level if it's only used by one department, which is responsible also for all the costs associated with that subscription. Let's see. And the numeric here is usually a code, a unique code used by kind of assigning, allocating cost, chargebacking, that sort of thing. We also have some business unit tag here. This could be assigned here or here. So these tags are included here, but it's up to you really how you want to do that, of course. Now, the operations team tag, let's see, regarding the responsibility of the subscription and the resources, we have a couple of tags here. We have, the business unit, we have operations team, owner, technical lead. Let's see. So those are slightly different tags where you might not want to use all of them. The owner could be is usually one person, or at least a person who has a specific role. Technical lead is also one person usually who's been assigned responsibility of performing certain governance and security related activities, kind of owning maybe the backlog at least, and planning the sprints and things like that. But the operations team, that would be multiple people, a team of course consisting of multiple people, related to a project or a DevOps team or DevSecOps team, or if it's just run by a central IT or the IT department for some reason. So you want to kind of think about how you assigned responsibility for the resources for performing governance and ensuring security of the environment, and then use the appropriate tags based on how you assigned responsibility. And then we have created by. Now this could be this information is usually also available in activity logs. Possible, of course, to dig into and see who actually did the configuration. but this helps if there are someone who wants to reach out to someone, if they notice maybe a recommendation in Defender, for example, or if they did, realize that there's been some kind of misconfiguration done, which kind of passed through the CI/CD pipeline and got deployed into the environment, then always good to reach out to a person directly as soon as that is discovered, using maybe automated analysis, be it in Defender or in a third-party product. So this provides kind of an easy way in to contact someone as quickly as possible, really. If there are any questions or recommendations that pop up as you do kind of the monitoring of the environment. Let's see, the created date, kind of obvious what that is. Kind of good to put in there because usually you would want to at least, migrate maybe to a later operating system eventually. You would want to maybe decommission old servers, replace them by new ones in an automated way. And if you do, maybe you are kind of rolling upgrades, that sort of thing, would be interesting to have this information. Just okay, how long ago was this resource created? Does it make sense that it's still alive or still allocated in the environment, or do you want to make sure that all the resources are deallocated and deleted after like maybe 6 months or a year at least? So that depends on how you do the upgrades of workloads and applications and all that, but it's definitely interesting to have this information available, kind of easily available in the tags. Now, decommission by is also good because some workloads, applications, servers, virtual machines are only deployed for testing or evaluating or purposes. So that means that they shouldn't really be present after a certain amount of time, as long a time as it takes to perform that testing or verify that upgrade goes smoothly, things like that. So and also it might be limited time based on a project, and once the project is ends, then you would want to decommission all the resources used by that project. So this is really good because this makes it easier to reduce or keep costs down over time, since resources will be removed, and it will be easier to remove resources once they are no longer useful. Now, a workload is usually by workload. Let's see. We have workload, we have application, and then service. These are three terms that are used, maybe not interchangeably, but a workload in this context means one or more applications, and application here is one or more services. For example, a application might have three services: front end, middleware or application tier, and then a backend tier. So a application would consist of three services, and this is not to be confused with this context here. The blog article goes into more details on what is meant by context, by the way. So the workload would be, for example, something that you could assign at maybe even at the subscription level, if it's a subscription that is used exclusively for a workload consisting of several applications. The application name, kind of evident. Application ID is something that might be entered manually in a tag, but it's more likely that that application ID tag is maybe assigned by the content management database, or the CMDB. So this could be either way. Either you could specify this tag manually, and it could be read by the CMD, or the CMDB itself could populate this tag for specific resources or resource groups. Then we have like the purpose again, SLA regarding the support, and regarding a lot of these governance tags, it provides you really good information that the governance controls and the security controls as well, for that matter, have been we say applied to this workload or application. If this information is lacking, it's unlikely, or more unlikely, that that it doesn't have maybe the right kind of availability or the quality that you are looking for, based on maybe how critical it is to the organization. So this provides insights into, well, how does the organization view kind of the criticality of an application? What does the support agreement look like? What are the requirements or tactics used for restoring the service or the application with the workload in the event of a failure? And also how long time do you want the how long time is it acceptable for the application to be unavailable before it really kind of hurts the business bottom line? And then the RPO, that would be, well, how much data are you willing to lose in a worst case scenario? So for example, that kind of ties into if you're using backups or if you're using replication to a secondary system. Some other tags: maintenance window, if there are times where the application will be unavailable, when people can perform upgrades or replace the application with a newer version, that sort of thing. It's also interesting to note if the system is being monitored by a third-party product. Of course, there is application insights, some built-in, of course, monitoring solution in Azure, but it also might be the case that it's being monitored by a third-party system, maybe running on-premise. Who knows? Might be maybe a SaaS solution that is monitoring this application. So that would be interesting, just to know if this is indeed being monitored by a third-party system, or if it's monitored by only by application insights, or at least ensuring that it's being monitored, at least if it's in a production environment. So a lot of these tags might actually be things that you would definitely want to see in a production environment, or maybe some might be, the UAT or staging, quality assurance. Some of those types of environments, resources might also want to be assigned some of these tags, but I would say that the priority here would be to ensure that these tags are assigned in production environments. Then we have some information security related tags, confidentiality, integrity, the CIA triad here, availability not really mentioned, but availability being RTO, RPO, disaster recovery, SLA, all that sort of thing. So what we have here is basically how critical the information is to the business. How critical is it to, how confidential is the data, how important is it to protect that data or to limit its exposure, to mitigate risks, or how quickly is it to remediate risks once they are detected. For example, if a security incident occurs for some reason here. So these are really good tags to assign, especially if you have a dedicated IT security department, if you have some data that is subject to regulatory compliance like GDPR, PCI, DSS, or HIPAA, or any kind of data regulation, really. So, and we also have a tag here to specify, to kind of help you provide some information here in the tags, what kind of data or confidential data is processed, transmitted, or stored in this system, be it the person identified by information, GDPR, or if it's PCI related data, and there's also which kind of regulation here is relevant for or applies to the application or to the subscription. Mind you that regarding PCI DSS and some other regulations, you would definitely have a look at how isolated these resources which have these tags are isolated from other resources which are not classified as PCI DSS, as there are some requirements in certain regulations which require you to separate environments or segregate environments to quite large degree, really, to be compliant at least. Now, providing the documentation tag is always nice, so if anyone has additional questions or want to look into the architecture or the design of the application or the workload, how everything's interconnected with integrations and maybe also to integration to external services, then it's really good to provide a link to that documentation wherever you might have it, and Confluence might be one place. It might also reside on a file share, of course. Now, if you have a cost management policy where the business has kind of set some guidance on how you want to limit cost, so that you have kind of control over spending over time. One way you would definitely want to do that is to deallocate resources that are not needed outside of business hours. So this table here consists of tags that can be used for different applications based on how they need to be available to the users. Now, this all depends on if it's internal users, if it's customers, or if it's partners, or if it's an application that only does some calculations, maybe a certain part of the month for accounting purposes, for example. Then it would be possible to design this automation around that application based on business requirements, making it possible to reduce cost for that, or at least to limit costs and spending. One tag here that is crucial to keep in mind is the UTC offset. So based on where the application is located around the world, you would want to ensure that you use this so it doesn't, a script, a PowerShell script in automation accounts doesn't shut down during business hours, or doesn't shut down an application during business hours just because you use it defaults to UTC 0. This is relevant, of course, for mostly for large organizations that have business locations or regional offices located maybe around the world, subsidiaries, affiliates, that sort of thing, around the world, where you still want to, of course, limit spending and control cost on a global scale, but then you definitely need to consider the UTC offset. Now, two tags here. So scale time, scale instances would only make sense if you want to scale up an application maybe in the evening, or maybe on a Friday or something that's like that. So if you want to create or if you want to, how would I say, increase the capacity based on a fixed schedule instead of doing it in a flexible way by just going by the CPU load or the memory load or something like that, which would of course trigger a scale out automatically, for example in app services or maybe virtual machines scale set as well. So this is usually done with maybe you have a third-party solution which does this or does this in another way, but this is relatively easily to accomplish using PowerShell at least, or a scripting language. Now the optional tags here, you could say that the profit center that could be used well if one department is responsible, for example, if IT is responsible for the costs as a business unit, then the profit center would be the ones that are benefiting from the application. For example, if it's the finance department, but the business has decided that they shouldn't be responsible for costs, all costs should be centrally managed by IT, then the profit center could be possible to use. For example, application tier provides additional insights into the architecture of a application. For example, if you have a lot of maybe a few resource groups, or at least a number of different types of resources. For example, a static web app, you have an app service, and then you have maybe Cosmos DB or SQL Server or something like that, and maybe then you have your virtual machine running something else, and then you have some logic app which does fulfill some role in the architecture. Then this could be helpful to provide insights for cloud architects, cloud security architects, on how what the structure of the application looks, the architecture. Now, if you deploy resources to different stacks, this is using, CloudFormation, AWS, but you might have different stacks of a application. Maybe you have a production subscription, but you have a development, a testing and staging, and a production stack, or at least maybe two stacks running. Then you could also want to use this, and maybe even want to switch between stacks. Maybe you want to have different stacks in different regions, that sort of thing. So you can use this to differentiate between the different stacks that your application is built upon or uses. Version that could be automatically created based on a CI/CD pipeline. Maybe these tags are automatically populated given the increment in a version. Software, this could be really useful to if you have a virtual machine, for example, and you want to provide information on which software is running on that virtual machine. Now this of course implies that you follow best practices and don't install all the different services that you need on the same virtual machine, so that you can easily perform upgrades, reduce complexity, and you have an easier time of doing governance and providing security, or scaling out that application. So this software tag would provide information on the web service, the middleware, the database server, which version, and of course if you upgrade that, want to upgrade a specific software, well then it would be interesting, of course, to see if you do kind of in-place upgrades on the same server, or if you rather install a completely new virtual machine and install the new version of uh, the software on that server, hopefully doing it in an automatic or optimized way, and not using kind of the manual approach. So let's see, regional office, nothing much to say about that. I mean, this would be the applications which are used only by the regional office and not by anyone else. For some reason, some regional offices or subsidiaries might use dedicated software for their own purposes, which could make sense then to have this tag applied to those resources, just to know why they are being used, since it might not be, well, provide enough value if you just look at kind of the cost and the numbers of users, but it might be necessary for this regional office to actually run those resources. And that would be maybe a regional office belonging to a department, but the others in the department might not need those the applications or services. So it might be due to maybe local jurisdictions or local regulations where you have to be compliant to the kind of national legislation in a specific country, which doesn't apply, of course, to other offices in other countries belonging to the same department. Portfolio, if you work with the portfolio management in large organizations, trying to kind of structure or classify, categorize sets of applications and sets of workloads. You might have portfolio management and portfolio managers, which also ties into the responsibility, especially kind of when it comes to maybe cost management and that sort of thing, as well as information security, or information ownership, compliance aspects, and that sort of thing. So portfolio could definitely be used in larger organizations. And let's see, project, self-explanatory. Specify the name of the actual project if the resources are used only by a project for a limited amount of time. Kind of relates to the expiration date and purpose tags as well, to be honest. The geography tag makes sense if you have a distributed application located in different countries or states or regions in Azure, or where you want to differentiate, and especially if you have scenarios where you use a traffic manager and you have a kind of globally distributed application where you want some parts of the application to be located close to the customers, then geography could be very well be used just to see, well, this stack is used for North America, this stack is used for Europe, and so on and so forth. Now the data owner could be used if according to maybe information security requirements, where you have a system owner who is responsible for the application and the resources, but not the data. Then you might have someone else, maybe belonging to the business, who is the data owner, who actually is responsible for the data itself being processed. And this could be really useful if you work with, GDPR and other regulations, where you might have requirements which state that you might remove stagnant data or data which you're not allowed to process once according to the GDPR, for example. there might be limitations on how long you can keep data retention, that sort of thing, and when you have to kind of get rid of data, especially if you use data for testing or UAT, that sort of thing, quality assurance. So let's see, exposure could be good to provide if you want to ensure that a application isn't exposed externally. For example, that should an application that should only be exposed to internal users or users who have kind of accessed the network using VPN, for example. So, or at least you could say, well, this is a public-facing application, and this means that it would be easier for IT security to analyze which services and applications are exposed to only to internal staff, or which applications are exposed also to partners or through maybe by customers, for example, things like that. And the reason you might want to do this is, well, you might want to separate public facing applications and services from internal facing applications and services due to, well, if you have a security breach in a public facing application, that would mean that it would have a lower impact if it's not possible for an attacker to continue attacking other systems once having owned the first application or the vulnerable application. So this is a way to kind of limit the consequences if an attack occurs, which is one way you could, well, mitigate risk as you work with security. So this also makes it easier basically to make sure that you don't make mistakes like placing public facing systems with internal facing systems by mistake. So this really helps to kind of keep track on exposure and to make sure that you have separated applications in some way from each other. Of course, you would need to think about things like system integrations, and it's also never that easy to just separate certain types of applications. For example, you will definitely probably have external facing applications which still need some form of integration with internal facing systems. So this is quite a focus for, security architecture and that sort of thing. Last tag, let's see, customer. So this tag here is about, well, if you're hosting resources which is used or are dedicated to a single customer, then you could specify this, use this tag just to say, well, this is used for customer A. This is these resources are used by customer B, and so on. So this provides some, well, insights into who is actually using a set of resources, which could be good. I mean, if providing that you provide support and those sort of things as well. So these are the tags in this resource tagging policy, which you will get access to once you subscribe to our newsletter. And these tags are all based on cloud service provider recommendations, Azure related Microsoft recommendations, and based on what I've seen during my work as a cloud security architect, doing reviews and working on to create policies like this for large organizations. So I do hope this was beneficial, and so please read the blog article and have a look at also this policy more in depth once you've subscribed to the newsletter. So thank you very much, and take care.